Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the show. I am honored, privileged to have my guest on today, Mr. Adam Chin. He is the director and co-founder of Enlifted, a close personal friend of mine, mentor, and I've actually done some work with him as well. So, Adam, thank you for coming on the show today. How are you?
Matt, what a pleasure it is to be here with you, man. It's been quite a while. It's been a few months since we last spoke.
It has been, yes. And, a lot is, and we'll jump right into the subject because like a lot of things have happened since then. You did a big trip that we had talked about before, we finished working together in late last year. And, one of the reasons I wanted to have you on is you have this very thoughtful approach to your relationship with alcohol. And I thought it'd be such a neat wrinkle to put into this show where there's oftentimes people that are, coming from that, whether it's a rock bottom or like the rooms of AA. And you have, I remember working with you. I just said it's such a thoughtful approach that really combined like the logical side of the brain with really in tune with like your own stories and your emotions as well. And we had these wonderful conversations when we were talking about it. So I'd love to start there. First of all, how would you define your relationship with alcohol specifically right here today at time of recording?
Oh, wow. How would I define it? The relationship with alcohol. Um, it's one of those things where it's the memories sometimes are rosier than the reality.
Yes.
I'm talking about. So
Mm, I sure do.
where the idea of being drunk with my friends, it looks a lot more nostalgic and sweet in retrospect than it was in the moment when I was feeling sick and throwing up and totally out of energy the next day. Um, yeah, no, like you and I have worked together, and I would say that I was a frequent drinker. At my highest point, I would drink 15, 20 drinks a week, um, let's say at the highest levels in my 30s. And that went down a touch into my 40s. And then, when you and I started working together, since then it's gone down to more like three or four on an average week. And so, I'm one of those, different types of folks that you've had on the show before, Matt. A lot of our culture's on off. People go all on. It's a binary switch, and
Yes.
they're full on into the booze scene, like you said, 10 to 15. That's like what I had in a day, back
Yeah.
in when I was going
Yeah.
a full blast.
Yeah.
And
100%.
and I'm more of the, I was more of the it's habitual. And what ultimately got me to rethink alcohol, there's a few things, but certainly the main impetus, Matt, was my personal health, my
Mm,
optimization of my health. I
right.
was starting to feel bad. Like I was starting to feel lethargic, and noticing some other uh, symptoms come up that were, a direct result of the alcohol. And man, it's game time. I'm in my mid 40s, and it's time to stretch out the middle of this wonderful life,
Mm-hmm.
versus making it shorter.
Yeah.
So I know you and we talked about this before we started rolling today. We want to talk about this newfound a thrill in the human optimization scene
Yes.
online with the
Yeah.
influencers. And you see it often now. It's people giving up alcohol. Thanks, Andrew Huberman. That one
Yeah. Right.
3-hour episode, man.
Game changer.
It
Yeah.
changed. I mean, it changed a lot of people's mind. I'm seeing it a lot online. I'm seeing it in real life. People
Yeah.
are putting down that pint more and more.
Absolutely, man. Yeah. And let's get into the Huberman podcast. Like we definitely, that was we were comparing some notes on that podcast for sure, and that came out, I would say the like late summer of last year. And you and I started working. You initially started with a sober October, which then extended into November. And, even since then, like you say, there's echoes of the work that we've done and the work that you've done into, your current snapshot of what you just gave us as far as your relationship with alcohol. But back to that Huberman Lab podcast was so, I just the way that he was able to like summarize so much information into otherwise, it's a very action packed hour and a half, that he listens. But man, so I'm imagining just the way that I remember we brought it up when we first started working. I imagine, was that one of the sort of those aha moments? Like that was like that moment you could no longer ignore. Was that sort of a light bulb moment for you listening to that podcast?
Yeah, I mean, it's inarguable that data that he speaks about on the podcast. And then what else was inarguable was, number one, how I was feeling when I was drinking, let's say 10 to 15 drinks a week for most of the past, let's say 5 to 6 years, and then at some points more than that earlier in my 30s. There was a bit of a break in between. Um, and then what's even more inarguable than that was my blood work,
Right,
which
right.
which which I have a wonderful functional medicine doctor here where I live in Charlottesville, Virginia, and we're going over the blood work, and he goes, given your habits, your other healthy habits that you have, why is this happening?
Hmm.
And then we looked at it and
Interesting.
it was like, I guess really it's one thing. And
Wow.
fortunately, my wife is also quite adamant when it comes to health and wellness, and she goes, "Stop rationalizing. You know what this is."
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, fatty liver is a real thing for me. That's what
Yeah.
because I was either genetics or the fact that I was a heavy child for a few years when I was young
Mm.
and ate a lot
Mhm.
of carbs for a period. Let's say something predisposed my liver to being a little weaker, or being, let's just say, taking on the symptoms of fatty liver more rapidly. So, and when I was dousing it with alcohol, it didn't matter that I was eating tremendously healthy food
Mm. Mhm.
for, let's say, 8 out of 10 meals.
Yeah.
It didn't matter that I was working out regularly and in otherwise good shape. Um, the effects that the alcohol had on my metabolism, the effects that it was having on my energy levels, my gut health. Thanks again, Huberman,
Yeah.
for alarming us and alerting us, I should say, in a
Yeah.
very good way about
Yes.
how the booze just wreaks havoc on our
Yeah.
gut biomes, just
Yeah.
completely wrecks it,
Yeah.
um, and ultimately ruining my sleep in the process. So yeah, I would pass out. Like I'm sure you've heard this old adage
Yeah.
with drinkers. It's like
Yeah.
drinkers don't go to sleep; they pass out.
100%. Yes. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they don't
And I
wake up;
lived
they
it.
come
Yeah.
to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. For
Yeah.
sure. For sure. Yeah, man. One of the key takeaways from me was when he mentioned how freely alcohol can just move through your body. It's water soluble, fat soluble, just can go through the blood brain barrier. It can just like go anywhere it wants to at any given point. I was like, that's terrifying to think that. It's like, it just feels like there's this phantom or some kind of like, in presence in your body that can just go wherever the hell it wants. And I was like, geez, that's terrifying to hear, isn't it?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, well, the problem is like, Jordan Peterson says this about alcohol. He says that alcoholism, you have to find something better if you want to beat alcohol, because
Yeah.
if
Right.
where he's from, I mean, where he's from, you're not too far away from where he was originally, raised,
Yeah,
and
absolutely. I'm in
in the
the same
coldest
city,
of
in fact. Yeah.
oh really, okay,
Yeah, yeah,
the
he's from
coldest
Edmonton.
of cold, dark winters. And it's like, what am I going to do? I got to have something that's more motivating, more inspiring, more
Yeah,
that's more of a north star in my life than simply
totally,
booze.
totally.
And because in the moment, yeah, I mean, crack open a six pack, you pour a nice pint. I'm an IPA guy. I like drinking IPAs,
Yeah.
but or I did more so than I do now.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, my friends are around. We're gonna laugh. It's like, okay, well, there's something to that. Okay, it's undeniable. Let's stop. Let's be accurate with our speech. Okay.
Sure.
Um, but Mark Sisson had this thing he wrote this past weekend in his Mark's Daily Apple. Mark Sisson, right? Primal Foods.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and he had this thing. He's like 70 years old, and he's yoked and in great shape. And he talked about essentially time preference with his habits with eating. He talks about
Mhm.
how when people say, "Hey, Mark, why don't you cut loose? Why don't you have some fun? Why don't you eat this pizza? Why don't you?" And he's like, "Listen, I like fun. I like delicious, but I like delicious in the short term and the long term. I like feeling good in the short term and the long term." For him,
Mm.
when someone's like, "Hey, you want to feel good?" He's not thinking now. He's thinking
Oh, I
at
love
least
that. Yeah.
medium term, near
Yeah. Yeah.
future stuff, right? So
Yes.
when someone's like, "Hey, let's go have some fun," he's thinking, "Well, let's go exercise in the sun. Let's play a game in the sun
Yeah.
together. Let's go eat
Yeah.
some good quality foods together. Let's make sure we're hydrated. Let's
Yes.
laugh." Stuff
Right.
that's going to make him feel good in the moment, and then
Yeah.
also over the long term. So the thing with booze is the ultimate short term,
Oh,
fix,
yeah.
because
Yeah.
booze is like, yeah, you're gonna have a lot of fun now. It's like
Yeah.
the payday check loans where you go get your check cashed.
Good analogy. Yeah.
You
Good
know,
simile.
you
Yeah.
know, yeah, you go get your check cashed now, but they
Yeah.
take like a third of your paycheck.
30. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then you get to spend it now.
Yes.
It's like, well, what kind of deal is that? So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, that's how I'm looking more at booze now. When I strategically, and again, I do, let's 3 to 4 week. Let's just say that's an average. If that's sometimes
Mhm.
it's not as much, sometimes it's maybe five. Okay, or
Sure.
if I'm going to a party with some, I'm going out with a friend or two, I'll have a cider or two or something like that. But
Yeah.
I know full and well the decision. It's like I'm making the
Yeah.
decision now to drink this thing, and it's going to perhaps create this feeling that I'm
Yep.
after, but there's a price. This is not
Yeah.
free. And
Yeah.
the thing that I have to pay, pardon me, I have to pay is actually valuable. It's something that
Mm.
I enjoy, which is
Mhm.
feeling good. Okay, the next day,
Mhm.
like it's
Yeah.
not like a fee that is negligible to me.
Yeah.
It's a fee that
Yeah.
I actually, it hurts to pay it. Okay.
Right. Right. Ooh, yeah. Oof. That's good. That's good. Choosing your words very carefully. Anybody that is familiar with my show and the coaching I do, the Enlifted, so that you're one of the men, behind the scenes and very much so into the language game. So I know that you choose your words very carefully. And yeah, they came off very powerfully the way you said it. You said another magic word here earlier, nostalgia, and we've kind of touched on that a little bit. And what are some of the things that you've perhaps go arounds? I know for a while you had the partake IPAs that were working for you. If I had my bubbly ready, I'm like, man, if I had the foresight, I would have been able to cheers you here, but
Yeah.
I completely forgot to grab them. So what were some of these things that have helped you now that you've have a more of an awareness of the nostalgia that's created by the ritual of drinking? What are some of the things that have helped you navigate that whole feeling of nostalgia that does come up?
Wow. So you know that the term nostalgia comes from the Greek word that means, and I'll get this mostly correct, it means pain from a wound that has not healed.
I did not
Um,
know this. That's
yeah,
so
yeah,
fascinating.
yeah. And so when we think about
Wow.
nostalgia, a lot of people associate that strictly with a positive association. I've actually been very suspicious of nostalgia for a long time because I see
Hmm.
how nostalgia can be used against people. You
Yeah.
see it in culture, you see it, you know, in
Hmm.
politics and things like that.
Yes.
Um, and actually, there's a very funny Sopranos episode where Tony Soprano's hanging out with this guy down in Miami, and this old mobster who's retired, and the mobster keeps saying, "Hey, remember when we did this? Remember when we did that?" And Tony just gets angry like a day and a half later. It's like, "Remember when's the lowest form of conversation?" And and that's basically nostalgia, right?
Right.
So when I say nostalgia, I mean there is pain of a time
Mm.
of a lost time in which, again, and I think a lot of people potentially could feel this too, is
Yeah.
this lost time of their youth when they
Mm.
started drinking, when they initially
Right.
started to drink and they were with their friends and they were being rebels and they were being young and free,
Hmm.
and they had less responsibilities, and they felt like they could do anything. And when you're drunk, you do feel like you could do anything. Unfortunately,
Yeah.
that's
And then you
that,
try.
and then you try,
Yeah.
and then womp
Yeah.
womp,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then
Yeah. Womp womp. Yeah.
yeah, and then
Exactly.
game over, man.
Yeah.
And yeah, so for me, I have a lot of great times. You and I talked about this. I used to live in Bangkok, Thailand, which is one of the great party cities, if there ever was one.
Hmm.
And I lived there for a total of about 8 years. And
Yeah.
I just went back over the past winter and met a bunch of my old friends there. And man, there we did have some good times. We were blasted a lot of the times,
Yeah.
and but and when I moved back to the States, when I would drink, I would think of those times. because like I would, part of me would think that, hey, this is a little reminder of what those times were like when I was with
Yeah.
those friends in that place. So that was pain from a wound that had not healed, and I had
Hmm.
not reconciled the fact that I was no longer there with them.
Right.
Um,
Interesting.
Allow me to also tell you that when I did go back, you and I discussed this when we were working together in the fall.
Mhm.
I go, hey Matt, when I go back to Thailand, I am going to be drinking, and
Yeah.
you're like, that's okay,
Yes.
it's okay. You're,
Yeah.
you're conscious
Yeah.
about it,
Yes.
and you know what? It was fun for a third of the time maximum, and then
Okay.
I just recovered the rest of the time.
Recovered the rest, right?
And I've been recovering since. So when I got back to the States, I basically cut it off, and I've
Yeah.
been like
Yeah.
working out and paying attention to my diet and being really conscious about my habits. So yeah, I mean that whole nostalgic thing. We went on a really long tangent there, but
Mhm.
yeah, that's how I feel about it.
Yeah, and you did the perfect segue because I was going to link that exactly that the trip that you'd mentioned, right? So you gave a little insight as far as the trip. You knew going in. I mean, like you say, you and I talked about it. Like it was projected into the trip as far as like I'm forecasting there's going to be some drinking, right? And yeah, I've never heard of that that nostalgia, that the rooting of that as far as like and you mentioned you being suspicious about it. Very interesting. I've been very nostalgic of like early 90s when I was like, 10 years old, Simpsons, like old footage, just like warms my heart right now, just for whatever reason. And I'm wondering, that totally makes sense now that you're saying it, that there's this longing or yearning for something that I hadn't quite identified. So thanks for pointing that out to me, actually. But yeah, anything else on the trip there? Okay, the one thing that comes up when you said is like, it's fun a third of the time, and then the other 2/3 you're recovering. Because I think the older that we get, where I was able to bounce back and go to work at 4 a.m. when I was a baker, on 2 hours sleep and just being seemingly indestructible in my 20s, dude. If I did anything like that, I'd be laid out for days. So was there like some missed time,
Oh,
like,
for
or
sure.
was
Yeah,
there?
yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. I
yeah,
mean, so to be very clear, it wasn't like I was drinking the entire time I was there. It
sure,
was
sure,
it was let's say 3 nights a week, which is still a
right,
lot for me going
yeah,
going from where I was to this 3 to 4 drinks a week. And let's just say that some of my friends over there can really party,
sure,
and
sure,
they've got that sort of liver, whatever that is, that superpower liver,
mm-hmm.
at least for now.
For now, yeah.
Um, and I did notice that there are a couple different types of people who drink. And I'm
Mm,
sure you noticed this too,
mhm.
there's the people that are drinkers and they drink specifically to get the feeling of being drunk, and they could care less about the alcohol that they're drinking. They could care less. It doesn't matter if it's
Yeah,
Everclear,
yeah,
White Lightning from Papa Still in the middle of Kentucky,
yeah,
or if it's like it could be the finest wine from
yeah,
Tuscany.
yeah.
It doesn't matter. But then there's people, unfortunately, I'm one of the other people. Like, I
Mm,
actually do enjoy the taste of
yeah.
certain alcohols. So one of the alcohols I had over there was Amarone, a type of wine that's from
Mm,
Italy.
mhm.
That I was just introduced to this. I mean, I maybe had a wine like this before, but so now I'm 46. I just tasted this and I was like, this is delicious, and it really was. It paired with food fantastically.
Right, right.
Um, but again, it all comes at a price. And the price was, yeah, I'm in Thailand. I could be doing all sorts of cool things and fun things. No, I'm in bed until 10 o'clock in the morning.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm feeling like I gotta psych myself up to wake up. Is it really worth it? I mean, how many
Yeah.
of those times is that worth? Because
Sure.
I've
Yeah.
got X amount of days on this planet. Okay, do
Yeah.
I really want to spend a lot of them?
Yeah.
Like fog brained and lethargic.
Yeah.
Um, so so yeah, that's basically how it played out.
Yeah. Gotcha. Now, when you came back, you've mentioned as soon as you got back, started really dialing things in and all that. Yeah, I'm just kind of curious, and I know I imagine the listeners would be curious as well. Like, I know you were on a like sugar minimization or elimination when we were talking back in October, November. Just kind of curious what you have going on these days as far as your habits and like whether it's workout habits, morning routines, anything. I always love talking about this kind of stuff. So yeah, feel free to fill us in on what you got going on as far as that goes.
Yeah, generally low carb. I mean, 80%, I would say, of my food is or 80% of my days are about 40 grams of carbs or less, maybe
Wow.
more depending on
Yeah.
the week. Um, again, I'm very fortunate that my wife is a fantastic partner, and uh, she's encouraging me. Sometimes it doesn't feel like encouragement; it feels like something else. But
Yeah.
she's very kind and encourages me to eat proper foods. And we stock. One of the keys of I'm sure you and your audience knows this, that about eating healthy is you simply crowd out. You stock the good stuff, and
100%.
you make it easy. That's another thing too, is you make it easy to eat well.
Hmm.
Versus making it hard. You do everything you can to hack it,
Yeah,
which
totally.
that's a different conversation. So yeah, that's generally my food choices. And I mean, even honestly, when those 3 to 4 drinks I'm talking about a week, they're less and less becoming beer, because it's heavy in gluten, heavy in
Yeah.
carbs. And then there's something about, I mean, gluten sensitivity is a real thing, and I
Hmm.
do believe there's something in it that can wreck the gut. um,
Mm.
and so I'm definitely staying away from that. But I tell you what, man, coming back from Thailand back in late Feb, early March, pardon me, uh, and having gone on that, I mean, because trust me, man, if I was drinking, and then the next day, what do you want to eat? You don't want to eat uh, grilled veggies and salmon and baked salmon. No, no,
So
no.
true. So
Give
true.
me give
Yeah.
me all the
Yeah.
hangover food. Give me,
Yeah,
and
man.
there's
Yeah.
delicious food over there too, both Thai and international food. So I would
S-
just eat everything. And then
Yeah. Yeah.
just the reprogramming coming back, it took me a couple of weeks simply to
Mm.
reprogram. So again, it's all this lost time. Now,
Yeah.
again, you got to quote unquote live a little, right? I mean,
Yep.
whatever that means. Um, but there's, instead of saying that, let me rephrase it. There is a price to pay. Did I overpay for that? Yes, I
Yeah.
overpaid for it.
Mm.
I overpaid for that thing.
Yeah.
I would like to pay, if I'm going to pay something, I would like to pay something of market value, or what I deem to be market value. And I was
Yeah.
paying more, right? So
Yeah.
alcohol was getting the better of me
Yeah.
when
Yes.
and of that
Ooh.
deal.
I like that. Yeah, that simile. Is that a simile or an analogy? I always forget
It's an
which one's the
analogy, a
analogy. Oh yeah.
metaphor. We can call it, yeah.
Metaphor. Yeah, exactly. Whatever it is. It's that. I like that. I like that a lot. Yeah. Alcohol is getting the best of me. What is your what would you say your definition of, I believe that we went over this at we jammed on this a bit in one of our calls, of like living a little or cutting loose now. What does that mean to you
Ah,
now? Like what is that?
man, I've been telling people this translation that you and I had
Yes.
for months now. So,
Yeah,
to
rad.
fill your audience in, the translation is something we use in Enlifted, is where we write something down, something that comes out of our mouth, so that we say colloquially, just as we think it, right? And these things that we write down are raw thoughts, and these raw thoughts, we repeat them over time. They become the basis of a story, and those stories form the foundation of our lives and how we see ourselves, right?
Mhm.
Well, I wrote down at some point early, and you were a sneaky bastard about this. You wrote it down. I said something. I said, how am I going to cut loose when I
Mhm.
stop drinking 10 to 15 drinks a week?
Yeah.
And then and like 5 sessions later, you go, "Hey, well, there's a question here I wanted to ask you. You said this 5 weeks ago, whatever it was." It said,
Yeah.
he said,
Yeah.
"So how are you going to cut loose?"
Yes.
And as Mark England says, my business partner, he
Mhm.
goes, I was staring at the words "cut loose," and I kept staring at it, and I kept
Mhm.
staring at it, I kept staring, and I go, well, instead of answering the question directly, how am I going to cut loose? I'm like, who has to cut loose? Do
Right.
you do loose people? Do really like relaxed people have to cut loose?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, do you think of the most relaxed person that you know? How do
Yeah.
they cut loose? They're loose
Yeah.
from the jump,
Yeah,
you
it's
know?
very good point. Yeah.
And I was thinking like, well, so I see what's going on here. I'm too tight. I'm
Yes.
too wound up.
Mm.
I'm creating a stress state more so
Mm.
than is necessary. I'm
Mhm.
doing that. Okay.
Mhm.
I'm either building an environment, or I'm putting myself in those situations, or I'm perceiving it. I'm interpreting the perception in a way that is stressful.
Right.
That's on me. That's on me.
Yeah.
Right. And
Wow.
again, the price of the alcohol, is that a good deal? And it's not a good deal, right? So I got to figure out another way. So I really, and again, is this something I can figure out and learn and reprogram overnight? No. That said, I have been thinking about how to start my days more loose, get more
Yeah.
loose. You know,
Yeah.
part of that is like, okay, so we can talk about this. I know a lot of
Yeah.
people on the show have are substance people and they want to just kick it all and go cold turkey. Well, you know, for me, I was never a big cannabis guy,
Mhm.
and I'm not really an addict generally anyway about certain things. I mean, I do habitual things, but addict's a little bit
Mm.
different. I know.
Mhm.
I tell you what, um, occasionally, like once every few weeks, even just putting on some music and ingesting some cannabis and just and stretching on a yoga mat and
Ooh.
rolling out my calves and rolling
Yeah.
out my and getting a foam roller and a lacrosse ball
Yeah.
and just chilling out, like doing stuff like girls know how to do instinctively, like
Yeah.
taking
Right.
a hot bath bomb bath, you know,
Totally, dude. Yeah.
like
Yeah.
all that, like the girls
Yeah.
have it figured out, okay?
Yeah. Right.
Like a lot of
Yeah.
guys don't. Guys think guys' version of this of a spa is literally in a can that they can crack open. This is
Yeah.
the guy's spa,
Yeah. There
or
we
you
go.
know,
Yeah.
that's my spa treatment. But the
Right.
girls have it figured out,
Yeah.
and I have to say, like doing stuff like that to get more loose.
Mm.
I would encourage anybody who listens to this who has a similar story as mine, who finds himself drinking because of stress. And by the way, Huberman's also said that it's a false bargain because the more
Yeah.
you drink, the more stressed you get. It's actually
Yes. That's very important.
it makes you less stressed in the second, but you got
Yeah.
to keep drinking it, and you got to
Yeah.
and more and more and more.
That's right.
So if you feel like you're going to booze because of the stress, consider integrating more relaxation techniques, more
Mhm.
relaxing activities, more relaxing time,
Yeah. Yeah.
getting away from blue screens earlier before you're sleeping, you know,
Mhm.
put on some candles on. Here's a hack. If you have the ability to do it, if you want to watch like a movie or a series at night, get like a secondhand or a cheap projector and have that
Yes.
project against the wall.
Yeah.
That's light that's not being beamed into your eyes like the screen you're staring at on your phone and on your computer all day.
Right.
It's getting reflected off of a wall. So
Yeah.
that's very chilling,
Yeah.
right?
Right. Right.
Watch that sort of thing. It's like a campfire story rather than a video game.
Love that.
So stuff like that, just getting more and more loose. That was the big translation that I had with you, was like, man, all this effort could simply be put into, again, my posture, my breathing,
Yeah.
the everything. It's about getting
Yeah.
loose.
Yes, dude, I love that. You know, and it works out so perfectly as far as like synchronistically. I just had a post I did, a reel that I did yesterday, describing like what was different about the first time I sobered up versus the second time. The second time being me getting much more into what you had mentioned, like call it like the yin activities, literally like yin yoga, you know, the breath work side of things, journaling, like you were talking about, it's like more of a feminine energy potentially, you know what I mean? That's why the guys maybe steer away from it, like I'm gonna go to the gym and throw some, you know, metal around. So as soon as I got into that, that was literally the game changer. And this like it's this core recklessness that I had that couldn't be satiated, negation acknowledged by like achieving and going to the gym and, you know, going to martial arts and all that. That was actually like just melted away as soon as I got into those more like relaxing activities. And it's, to me initially, now looking at them, it makes perfect sense. But at the time, it's felt very counterintuitive. I thought I had to do more, achieve more, be more like violent, whether it's like take up kickboxing or something like that, right? And it was the exact opposite energy that I needed because I was so starved for that, like, you know, that side of the coin, so to speak. So I love how you brought that up.
Yeah, it sounds like you're like me. Like the more loose you got, the more you got done.
Right.
Well,
Yes.
we're convinced it's the opposite. We're convinced
Yeah,
that you have
man.
to get all jacked up
Yeah.
and aggro and adrenalized to get things done. But I was burning out that way. I was
Right.
burning out. I get
Yeah.
way more done being more consistent and more
Yeah.
loose.
For
You know.
sure. Yeah, for sure, man. And yeah, I'm kind of curious, like a couple of things come up for me with that is like, um, for me, like I always think, okay, like I still have this, so I'm much more aware of it, and I'm releasing my grip on it. But I have this idea, this like, you know, the collapsed distinction of like work and stress, they go together. I can't, you know what I mean? Part of my
Yeah.
brain says I can't get things done if I'm not in that like chest breathing, urgent, it has to be done tomorrow, or it has to be done yesterday, check things off the list. Like I needed that energy, or so I thought, in my past life. And I carried that into, my entrepreneur journey. And it served me very well initially at the inception, of course. Right. And that's what I knew. And I'm like, okay, I'm top, on top all this stuff. And gradually over the last year or so, I've really noticed that it's impeding me now. And I'm like, I don't, again, negation's coming up, but like, I don't need to have this like inner boss that I had, because I've been searching for the person that used to motivate me with the like, well, you got to get this done, the fear-based motivation, then, the 90s management style. I've been doing that with myself. I took that aspect into my own management of myself. And dude, it's been challenging for me to break that apart and realizing, I'm about 3 weeks in for like no caffeine now, which I've been doing for 20 plus years every day. And at that, I'm just like, there's a lot more like subtleties that I'm noticing about my energy, my inner dialogue has like, and I am calmer. And to your point, I am getting more stuff done. The main takeaway for me though, and the big change for me is I'm enjoying getting the stuff done now, as opposed to just fucking slamming around, wait, you know what I mean? So how has it been for you? Like, does that resonate with you, some of that?
Well, it's interesting that you use the term inception a moment ago when you described your initial use of that type of energy to power you through your day. So my internet was out for about a week. So this is couple weeks ago. My wife and I were like, "Hey, you want to wind down to a movie tonight?" Well, what kind of Blu-rays do we have? I've got 5 here, and they're from 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So one of them. So I pull out the Inception,
Mm,
which is one of my all-time favorite movies.
hell yeah.
And we watch it, and I'm thinking, this is an interesting movie. And watching it again, I was thinking, this movie is about, and a lot of Christopher Nolan's movies are about time and how time works and how we perceive time. And as you're telling me all this stuff, I'm also seeing this phenomenon in my own life, is that I see that, when people tell you these phrases, these heuristics, they say, "Hey, be in the moment," or "be present," and you hear
Right.
that, and you hear it
Yeah.
over and over again. And if you're not there yet, they can come off as trite. They can come off as hackneyed. They can come off as I mean, even meaningless if you hear it enough times, right? But what those movies are about, like Tenet is another one, his more recent movie
Mm,
that came out a couple years ago. It's about how time is perceived. And you remember in Interstellar, another one of his movies, about how like
yes.
when 5 minutes here or 10 years up on the spaceship.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's, if you think about when you dial into the task that you're doing. So if it's work and I've got 10 things to do and I'm looking at my list and I'm thinking, okay, I've got this time. But if I allow myself to go into this time and get as much time perception in this
Mm,
nominal time that exists, it will feel like I'm on another planet. Like I'm down there, they're up there. And I'm and and that that creates space so you have this awareness of space. Oh, 5 minutes. 5 minutes is plenty of time. That's a
mm,
lot of time.
mhm,
What can you do if you feel that way? You can also breathe.
mm, mhm, mhm.
So I can, okay, if my thoughts are slower, my breath is slower, I'm perceiving those 5 minutes as being very, very broad. Not necessarily
Mm,
infinite, but broad, right?
mm,
I
mhm.
mean, think about what that would do to someone's day. So I've got a
Mhm,
checklist, like you're on this checklist today.
mhm.
And yes, I could look at that checklist and get you do all that and be all like aggro and
Yeah.
caffeinated, and the day shrinks and the day becomes this, right?
Yeah.
Or I could get in here and I could really
Yeah.
connect with you on this show
Totally.
and I could dive into it and I
Mhm,
could really, really be here. And
mm,
all of a sudden, this becomes this. It's really it's our perception of time is, at least as far as I know, the only time machine control we have. Like is
wow. Yeah.
it's so, and to me, if we can, and I'm sure Ram Dass has said this in a much more like eloquent way,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
if that ability to understand the phenomena, and then B, to have a tool set to help, you know instigate it, on a personal level can create this, again, looseness, relaxation, this
Yeah.
ability to get things done in a way that doesn't seem time being claustrophobic,
Right.
it expands,
Yeah.
so we
Oof.
we go in and we warp the space,
Yeah.
so
Yes.
that was some so again, thanks to internet for going out and
Yeah.
allowing me to watch Inception on Blu-ray
Right.
again.
There we go.
I got
Yeah.
to watch a lot of fun
Yeah.
trailers from 2012 as well.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. I love that concept, man. That was so deep, and yeah, I'm definitely feeling that, and I'm gonna be even just throws another wrinkle as far as like my just awareness of like perception of time and all that. I love that what you just said there. Super cool. I want to be let's see. We'll bring her in for a landing because I do want to have you for a few minutes before you have to hop on a few other calls here. Dude, I really appreciate you coming on. I know it's yeah, generally you are behind the scenes guy in Enlifted, so I'm super honored that you came on. I always binary acknowledge on this. Always enjoy talking with you, man. So I do have a couple of like word association things. We'll do a little bit of a shorter form answers. That doesn't necessarily have to be just like a one word, but just like just a sentence about it. So before we do that, I have one question for you as far as when you're talking about like and this comes up a lot in recovery and with the coaching that I do, is like we want to design a life for you that's so robust with activities that you want to do, perhaps stuff that's been on the periphery that you've always wanted to do. We're going to bring those activities in. And then as a result, it just sort of like you mentioned with the dieting, crowds out that need for perceived need for alcohol. So what is it these days that's like inspiring to you?
Wow. That's a great question. It's interesting. It changes from time to time, but as I get older, as I upgrade my age, pardon me, as that's the
Love
new
it.
way of saying it, upgrade my age on this earth.
Love it.
Um, I have to say the work that we do, man. Mark does this thing where when he graduates a level 2 class of Enlifted coaches, he asks every one of the Enlifted coaches to write me an email to
Yeah.
say something about what they think about the program, and I get these. Once a quarter, I get 20 to 30 emails of people telling me um, what it is that they've gained from the work, and man, that's a white pill, as they say on the internet. That makes me very optimistic. It's like, okay, cool. I'm doing something that's helping other people expand themselves. And to me,
Hell yeah.
that's what inspires me. That they would have that there are other people out there who have the motivation to to make that change in their lives, whatever that change may be, to make themselves
Yeah.
better. And that's really inspiring.
Love that, man. It's a great answer. Okay. Word association, moderation.
Good. Difficult for many people, for many.
Yeah. Yeah. Love it. Yeah. Diet.
um Mike Bledsoe was the greatest influencer on diet for me.
Oh,
Diet is when you talk about an animal, you talk about what's their diet.
yeah. Okay.
Think about it.
Yeah. Interesting.
This kangaroo the kangaroo exists on a diet of X and Y, but when we say diet, there's generally these negative associations with it, or constrictive
Constrictive. I was going to say
versus
limited. Yeah.
versus preference. What fuels a
Ooh,
kangaroo? What
yeah.
fuels a kangaroo? What fuels a
Yeah.
human being?
Yeah.
I know
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
fuels me, and it's
Yeah.
not Cheetos and McDonald's.
Yeah. Exactly. That was going to be one of my next words. So perfect setup. Preference.
Uh,
Preferences.
Gut feeling. That's the word
Ooh.
association. Gut, because your gut feeling, when one must tune their gut feeling to make sure that preferences are functional versus whimsy.
Yes. Okay. So I guess that'd be my next question. Can preferences become limitations? I think that's what you're saying. There's like you have to have it calibrated in such a way.
Well, when I go to if I go to my Mac here and I go to Chrome and I go to preferences, or Apple something preferences, that usually means I'm going to settings and I'm optimizing the
Cool. Cool.
application for my benefit, for my
Yes.
for my productivity, or whatever the tool. And by the way, that's a word I've stopped using too. It's productivity. I
Interesting.
started using the word constructivity and building. To me,
Ooh.
productivity is a word that is inhuman, and it's the word that's used should be used for managerial schools only. I
Right.
think. I
Yeah.
mean, when I get up in the morning, I don't want to be productive. I want to build.
I
I want to
love that,
build.
man.
I want to
Ooh.
construct.
Even you saying that, like I could feel an energetic shift, felt way just freer. Like, yeah. So is it
Yeah.
constructivity? Constructivity?
Yeah, I say, what am I
Hell yeah.
building today?
What am I building today?
Yeah, I want
Yeah.
to build something. What am I building? My body, my mind,
Yeah.
my building, my work, my business.
Yeah.
Am I being constructive rather
Yeah.
than being productive?
Very cool. I love that, man. I'm borrowing that heavily for sure. Creation.
Creation, more blue collar than
Hmm.
I used to think. Blue, I
Interesting.
Creation is blue collar. That's the word that comes to mind. Blue collar.
Wow. Okay. Final one for today. Imagination.
Um, Freedom.
Love it, man. Adam, thanks so much for coming on the show today. Again, always love having you on. We'll do a part 2 sometime down the road. I'll reach out to you. But dude, thank you so much for coming on.
Hell yeah, man. My pleasure. Let's do it again.
Absolutely.